Hi, students. Welcome back to literature. It is Tuesday, September the 29th. All right. You have your five elements page that we started last week, and we completed the setting, the style, and the leading idea. So today we're going to do the plot. We'll see how we are on time to do the character. But for right now, we're going to look for the plot. We're going to read page. I like to go back and review. I always like to go back and review because I struggle with my memory. I don't know. I know you guys remember everything. I don't. So let's go back to the very beginning of one, and I'm going to read straight through. I'm not going to stop until we get to a little bit past halfway down page 2. All right. So chapter 1, page 1. Missed it again. Go find the arrow, Rudy. If it fell near the old rotten log over there, the one with a big hole in it. Walter Tell laid his Swiss crossbow on the grass and sat down on a granite rock in the green alpine pasture. He stared out at the white circles he had carved on a big pine tree, the target at which he had shot all afternoon. Well, will I ever hit the bullseye? He asked himself. Will I ever become a great bowman like father when I grow up? Little Rudy, his brother, and Prince, the herd dog, scrambled about in the pine forest searching for the lost arrow. As he waited for them to find it, Walter glanced up at the cold gray peaks of the Alps, white with autumn snow. Page 2. Here it is. Prince smelled it, shouted Rudy, holding up the arrow in his little brown hand and smiling happily. Prince barked and wagged his tail. He always barked when he found an arrow. He seemed to know that his nose was keener than even Rudy's sharp blue eyes. It was under the ferns by the rotten log, laughed Rudy as he handed the arrow to his brother. Try again, Walter. Maybe this time you will hit it. There's the evening bell, Rudy, but I'll shoot once more, and then we must go home, for the goats are getting restless and the wind is chilly. The goats, feeling the oncoming night, were already nibbling their way downward, and standing with his legs apart, Walter placed an arrow in his crossbow and drew back the leather thong. Then then sighting the target, he suddenly unlatched the trigger. Twang, sped the arrow, and to his utter surprise, Walter saw it bury itself in the very center of the target. You hit it, shouted Rudy, jumping up and down in happiness. If father would only come now and see. Walter eyed the quivering arrow, and at last he had hit the bullseye. He felt proud and happy. Then, glancing at the alpine peaks turning rosy in the sunset light, he walked to the tree and pulled the arrow out from it, calling, Come, Rudy, let's go home. It's growing colder. I wish father could come. He's so late. When he left home this morning, he told mother that he would be back before sunset with a chamois or a fox or something. Okay, so this whole time that we've been reading about one thing. They're practicing their crossbows and they have a target on a tree and they keep shooting the target, but they miss the target. And Rudy and who is it? In his dog Prince go and they hunt down the arrows that miss the target. And Walter is the one that's shooting. Finally, after trying so many times, Walter finally hits the arrow. The whole time, the plot of this story is trying to he wants to be a great bowman like his father. So that's what his goal is, to hit the target. So your plot is going to be, if we go down to the first, second, third, fourth, fifth paragraph. A paragraph is, if you see all the words that are lined up on the left-hand side, and every now and then you'll see a word that goes in before it starts, That's the beginning of a new paragraph. It's a new thought. Okay. So it's called an indentation. It goes in a little bit. There's one where it says, here it is. And there's another one that says, there's the evening bell. And there's another one that says, standing with his legs apart. And then another one says, you hit it. And then the next one, the fifth time it goes in, is called, I'm sorry, it says, Walter eyed the quivering arrow. At last he had hit the bullseye. He felt proud and happy. So that is our plot. Walter eyed the quivering arrow, and at last he had hit the bullseye. Notice that also in this sentence, we also have what we used for the alliteration. He had hit. H, 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 he had hit. Okay? So remember that every event, everything that happens, there's a cause, something that caused it to happen. If there was no cause, there would be no event. So in a minute, I will show you on the board what I wrote down, what the plot is. And those of you guys who have been in my classroom for several years, if you just want to underline it lightly, I would, spelling group 1 and 2, I wouldn't do this. It's only for spelling group 3. For the plot, you want to underline in your book where it says, Walter eyed the quivering arrow, and at last he had hit the bullseye. And it's going to be in quotes, okay? And you're going to put down page 2. Now for cause, remember the cause goes in brackets that look like this. So after your sentence, you're going to put the first one, which for you, I'm not sure, you know, it's going to go in. We're going to look, why did Walter finally hit the bullseye? Because we're going to have to go back to page 1. Before there is an event, before something happens, there's a cause. First the cause and then the event. The cause comes first, then the event. So that means a lot of times the cause is before they mention the event. So we're going to have to go back to page 1. And it's the third paragraph where it says, will I ever, ever hit the bullseye? He was desperate to hit the bullseye because, why? Because he wanted, will I ever become a great bowman like father when I grow up? He wanted to be a great bowman when he grew up, like his father. So he kept trying until finally, at last, he had hit the bullseye. So that is the cause. That's what made him keep trying and trying until he finally hit the bullseye. So that is our plot. And don't worry, I'm going to write this, I'm going to show you on the board, then you can pause it and write it on your paper. Right now, I just want you to listen. Okay, the last thing we have left is the characterization. So we're going to look for what type of character their father has, all right? It's how their father acts. Remember in, I believe it was in history, we studied that whatever is in your heart, that's what causes what you say and what you do, the decisions that you make. So that's why we look at the character, because that tells us what is in his, what kind of character, or what's in his heart. So right there where we left off where it says, when he left home this morning, he told mother he would be back before sunset with a chamois or a fox or something. Okay, the next paragraph says, Prince and the goats were far ahead, and by the time the boys saw their log hut at the edge of a pine forest, the sun had already set. Only a faint glow still lingered on the crests of the mountains. Rudy and Walter stopped on their way downward to kneel for a moment before a humble cross built beside the path. When it says humble, it means a very simple, rugged old cross. It wasn't very fancy or well made. Just a little cross that was stuck in the ground on the pathway home. Their father had taught them to do this. So they did this because that's what their dad taught them. Then they chased each other down the well-worn path. When they reached home, the goats had already huddled into a pen made of 3 large boulders, and here they felt safe from the prowling bears and wolves. For in those far-off days of the 13th century, many wild animals roamed the Alpine mountains. So We haven't seen the father come across in the story yet. But the boys did something that the father taught them, and that was to kneel for a moment before a humble cross. And they did that out of respect for God. And that shows that Father was a Christian. Father believed in God. Father would not kneel before the cross if he didn't believe in God. So, most likely, Father had biblical principles, probably read the Bible, probably went to church. We'll find out more about him as we read the story. But right now, we know that he believed in God. So, I am going to move my camera over to the board and I'm going to show you what to write. All right. Okay. So I'm going to move out of the way in a minute and I've got the plot behind me. Now, this is a lot of writing. So spelling group number 1, you don't have to write the plot. All right. You can skip the plot, but I want you to know what the plot is. So when I move out of the way, at least read it. Spelling group number 2, you're going to write the character of father. And I chose that one because it's shorter for you to write, all right? It's a lot of writing, so you don't have to write the plot. I'll put it up in just a minute. The rest of you will write the plot and the character of father. All right, so spelling group number 1, pay attention. Even though you don't have to write this, I want you to pay attention. You're not writing plot, okay? You're gonna begin writing with Walter I, the quivering arrow. It's going to be in quotes. You start here with a quote and you end with a quote, a comma, and then a quote. Page 2, that's your event. Your cause, you're going to have you have what's called a parentheses. A parentheses here, and that means we're separating this from this so that we separate the event from the cause. The cause, what caused him to finally hit the bullseye? Because he thought to himself, will I ever become a great bowman like father when I grow up? Okay, you're going to end it with a question mark because it's a question. This is a question mark. You start with a quote, you end with a quote because we're we're saying something that the author said in his story. And then you're going to put page 1 and you're going to close it with another parentheses. This parentheses is going like this and this one's going like that. All right, spelling group 1. I just want you to know that you don't have to write this. So the rest of you, pause the video, write your answer, and I'm going to switch it over to characterization. Okay, I'm back. So for characterization, which is the very first in red, first lines up here on top, you're going to write father and then you're going to write colon. That means I'm separating this from this. This is not in the book, okay? We're writing this so when we read it, we know who we're talking about. We're talking about father's character. You start writing out of the book with Rudy, so you're going to put your quotes. Rudy and Walter stopped on their way downward to kneel for a moment before a humble cross, comma, built beside the, and I didn't finish writing it. I'll finish writing it for you while you write. Beside the, their father had taught them. Their father had taught them to do this. All right. So we started with a quote. We end with a comma first and then your quote. Leave a space and then put P period 2, page 2. This is an abbreviation for page 2. So that tells us what kind of person father was. He believed in God. He knelt before the cross and he taught his children how to do the same. All right, go ahead and pause your video And we are done with first scene of the apple and the arrow. Bye-bye.